welcome to Entre Nosotras, Latina Voices. Today, I'm honored to have Commissioner Ileana Holguin, who represents Precinct 3 in El Paso County. Last time we talked a lot about COVID, and so today we're going to continue the conversation with other topics. Commissioner, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Yes, no, of course, my pleasure.
Last time we talked a lot about COVID, so maybe, hopefully things will improve. And let's talk about some of the other topics. You're the only Latina, you're the only woman on Commissioner's Court. Why do you think that's important?
I mean, diversity is very, very important. And it's very important that, especially in our local government, we have voices from all different kinds of background on the court. I mean, one of the reasons that I decided to run for this position was really because of that. I did feel that it wasn't right that we didn't have a woman's voice on the court. The last time that we had a woman's voice on the court was back before then County Judge Veronica Escobar. She resigned in order to run for her current position for Congress. And so that was in August of 2017. So since then, we had not had a woman's voice on the court. And for me, that was something that was terribly important. We all know how important it is to have diverse opinions, diverse views, people who come from different backgrounds, have had different experiences. I mean, that's so incredibly important, and that's something that was missing. So I'm very proud to be able to provide those different different experiences that I've gone through that I think could shed light. It could make us look at things different, issues that we're contemplating and debating and discussing. Apart from that, I think my legal background, so I'm an attorney by trade, I think that my legal background is also a positive that I'm bringing to the Commissioner's Court. Again, just a different way of looking at things, a different way of maybe thinking about things that maybe some of the other commissioners haven't really thought about. So diversity is incredibly important. Hearing from all kinds of different points of views and backgrounds is incredibly important. And I'm glad that I can contribute towards that.
And could, for our audience that maybe don't know, could you talk a little bit about your background or some of the other positions you've held in public life?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm an attorney. I've been licensed for 20 years now. I first became licensed in the year 2000. My particular field of expertise is immigration and nationality law. So I've practiced immigration law ever since I became licensed, and it's the only law that I've ever practiced. That's always been just, immigration law has always been a passion of mine. So when I was still living in Austin, I worked at a small firm where we specialized in immigration law. After I moved back to El Paso, in 2006, I was hired to be the executive director of Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services, which is the largest provider of free and low-cost legal services to immigrants and their families, not only in West Texas, but at the time in southern New Mexico as well. So I became the executive director of DMRS in January of 2006, and it was an incredible experience for me. DMRS is the largest provider of services and still continues to be the largest provider of services, and just being able to help so many families was just an incredible experience that I'll never ever forget. So I stayed as the executive director of DMRS until September of 2012, so almost 7 years. After that, I went back into private practice, and I've been in private practice since. So I've had my own office. I have a law partner, Albert Armendariz Jr., who is a very well-known and very well-respected immigration lawyer as well. And so in our office, we focus on everything from helping people apply for their lawful permanent resident status based on a family relationship. Maybe they're married to a U.S. citizen or they have a U.S. citizen son or daughter. We help people with their applications for naturalization to become U.S. citizens. We also represent people who are in immigration court proceedings where they're potentially facing deportation from the U.S. So I've been practicing immigration law for 20 years now. Nonprofit work was always very important to me. I've served on different boards throughout the years, both in Austin when I was still there and here in El Paso. Most recently, I was on the board of managers of UMC, of the hospital district really that oversees UMC, and I've served on boards of organizations like Border Network for Human Rights, the Isleta Education Foundation, which is an organization whose focus is to raise money, scholarship money for seniors who are graduating from YISD schools. I've served on boards like the Teens in Action, which was a nonprofit in the Mission Valley.
It's a lot, right?
Organizations over the years, yeah.
And I guess what I was also trying to allude to is that previously, weren't you the chair of the Democratic
Yes.
Party?
I was also the chair of the local Democratic Party for 4 years. So I was elected in 2016, and then I was reelected in 2018. In 2020, I did not run for reelection because I knew I was going to run for county commissioner. So I was the chair of the Democratic Party for 4 years. And while chair, one of several priorities that we had was, of course, increasing voter turnout, which we were able to do. And also making sure that we elected Democratic elected officials throughout the county, which we were also able to do in 2018. El Paso became 100% Democratic as far as all of the county seats, the state seats, all of our local government seats were held by Democrats. So we spent a lot of energy and efforts on trying to register new voters, get more people interested in the political process, and I'm glad to see that we did. We broke a lot of records in those 2 elections.
And recently, I know we've had a large turnout of the youth vote, and our county has kind of been at the forefront of leading turnout. For my students or for people watching this on TV, why should they keep an eye on local government? Why should they care what the county is doing?
Local government affects every single aspect of our life pretty much every single day. Like we talked about, the condition of our roads when you're driving to and from work, when you're driving to and from school, that's a big part of county government. Of course, the county levies taxes. We set a tax rate. We determine how much people are going to pay in their property taxes. And everyone pays that. We oversee the hospital district. Here in El Paso County, access to quality medical care has always been a priority for us, thankfully. And that's why we have an organization and a county hospital as strong as UMC, who's able to do tremendous things with the limitations that all county hospitals have, right, as far as their budget. The sheriff's department is a county department. So that's, public safety is very, very important. The court system. So the court system is overseen by it's part of our county government. So when you come into the courthouse, whether or not you have a civil matter or a criminal matter, or you need a protective order, or you need to probate a will, these are all things that are administered by our county government.
And speaking of that, right now, is the county operating kind of like this, using distance services? Or, if somebody wants to get married for Valentine's Day, can they still do it? Or is it going to be like a Zoom wedding? Can they still go in person? Or, could you talk about the operations right now?
Yeah. So many county employees are teleworking, so they are working from home. That's not to say that the county is closed. It's not closed. It's just that employees are answering the phone at home, doing their work on their computers at home. I'm doing a lot of meetings virtually the way you and I are doing it. So that's all happening. Now we do have some employees, some county employees that do physically still report to work. So for example, our roads and bridges crew, of course, everyone at the sheriff's department, they've never, they don't have that luxury of being able to work from home. Our janitorial staff. But you also have other departments that are slowly starting to come back. Now, to answer your question about marriages, that marriages have actually been going on for a while, throughout most of the pandemic, I would venture to say. So our county clerk, Delia Briones, recognized that that was a very important function of county government, is issuing licenses. So she came up with a way to make sure that people could still get their marriage licenses. And she was very careful about it and making sure it's not like before where you could have just tons of people walk in and apply for a marriage license. She did it so that it was done by appointment, and the appointments were scattered throughout the day. And she did it with a small skeleton crew of hers, but recognizing that there's services that we have to continue providing. And then slowly, as time went on, the judges have started to come back as well. A lot of judges are still holding court virtually, and it's of course has its challenges, but I think overall it's been working. It's been working. So we do have a lot of the courts. Courts are going on. It's just that a lot of them are virtual. But we do have marriages that are still going on, and sometimes they happen here in the courtroom, again, with very strict limitations of who can be here. So we don't have a lot of staff here in the courthouse on a daily basis, but we do have some. But the county government is still working. We're all working. It's just not like before where we were all here.
You're trying to limit the exposure of people to COVID, and so speaking. And I know last time all we did was talk about COVID, but I guess it's just such an overwhelming topic. I know in some other parts of the country and some other counties, they were thinking of releasing low-level offenders to try to prevent COVID spread within the county and to try to keep the sheriffs and law enforcement safe. Is that something El Paso's doing, or if you could speak to that?
So actually, even before COVID, El Paso really engaged in a lot of reforms at the county level, having to do with bond, for example. And so El Paso started reforming its bond practices and policies back in 2015, 2016. And we actually have a department now where the purpose is to try to identify people who could be released on a PR bond, which stands for personal recognizance, which is basically a person gives their word that they're going to appear for future hearings. And that was done as a way to try to facilitate people getting out of the jail sooner if they were low-level offenders, non-violent offenders, but who maybe couldn't afford to post a couple $100 bond. So we didn't want people who didn't have to be sitting in our jails to be sitting in our jails simply because their family couldn't come up with the $200, $300, $400, $500 bond that they needed to post. So we've had a PR bond program in existence even before the pandemic, and that certainly has continued because, yes, we're trying to stop the spread of COVID. Now, the sheriff's office has done a really great job of trying to keep its inmate population safe, and also, of course, all of the deputies as safe as they can, with making sure everyone has the proper PPE and the sanitizing equipment, and trying to make sure that we're trying to keep everybody as safe as possible.
I know the city of El Paso has laid off workers. A lot of their staff in the public libraries. Has the county had to furlough workers or lay off workers?
No, thankfully we have not. We have not had to furlough or lay anyone off. And that was a decision that was made at the beginning, that the county didn't want to have to do that to its employees. What the county did do was go back to the various departments and ask the departments to look and see where they could reduce their own budget. We figured that, the departments themselves, rather than for example, the commissioners coming in and saying, okay, everyone gets an across the board cut of the same amount. The court decided that it was better to let the various departments decide where they could maybe make cuts within their department. And a lot of the department heads decided to maybe freeze hiring and not, maybe they had a few open positions, but then decided, okay, well then maybe we don't need to hire those right now. So the county itself did not order a hiring freeze. We never told the departments, you can't hire anymore, no more hiring. But a lot of department heads did take that upon themselves as one option to be able to reduce their budgets, because we did ask all of them, we all have to work together to try to get past this. And the county has been suffering financially. There's been our second greatest source of revenue is sales tax. And of course, for most of 2020, people couldn't be out, going out shopping and buying things. So COVID has put a financial strain on the county. And so we did have to ask our department heads to look and see where they could help make cuts. And so that was one of the areas. Many department heads, not all of them, but many departments decided that maybe they wouldn't fill some of those vacant positions that they had.
Is our county in danger of going broke or of laying people off, or are we, because a lot of cities are facing bankruptcies. I don't know about the counties, but could you speak about that? Should we, I guess, because I watch all those pandemic movies, so I was, I was thinking that I was scared, I guess, when the city stopped collecting the recycling. So it made me think, oh, maybe they're gonna, it starts there and then it's gonna go to trash. And are we still able to maintain the services we have now with the budget we have, even though it's been lower?
Yeah. So I can't speak for the city, but at the county, we have been very lucky. We're still in a good financial position. I think the county took action early. We knew early that we were going to get hit hard and our finances were going to suffer. And I think, immediately the county started looking for ways to save, to reduce spending. And so we're in a good, financial position compared to a lot of other counties across the state and across the country. So, and I think a good indicator of that is the fact that we haven't had to fire anyone. We haven't had to furlough employees. And so we've been able to manage our finances even during this crisis. And that's why we get a weekly briefing on our finances. Every single commissioner's court meeting on Monday, there's an item on the agenda to talk about our finances. Not just the COVID money, but just our finances in general. So we get briefed on that regularly, and we've really done, I think the county has done an excellent job on really keeping track of that, so that we're not in a position where all of a sudden we have to cut out an entire service or think about having to fire employees.
I think it's a top 5 employer in El Paso, but do you know roughly how many people the county employs? I guess including the sheriff's office and.
I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's over 3,000. I don't know the exact number. But yes, I mean, we're a large employer here in El Paso. All the government, when you take in the ISDs, county government, city government, we have a lot of federal agencies here in El Paso. Government itself is the largest employer, really. But like I said, we've been incredibly lucky that we haven't had to face that possibility of having to, lay off anyone, thankfully.
Good news for anybody that has relatives or friends that work for the county, that at least their job is stable. And so speaking of the financial situation, this year it's a legislative session. I know that the state also gets a lot of money from sales tax, and and even when you order online, you're paying sales tax. So what do you think is have you gotten any information about how the state, is the state going to reduce contributions to county government, or do you have any information on what's going on? And I know the session just started, but maybe talk about the priorities you guys have, or where you see it going.
Yeah. Yeah, the session just started, and so those fights are just going to start happening. We've been warned pretty consistently that, sales tax revenue is down and to expect cuts to the budget. Of course, we have our delegation who fights to make sure that we don't cut services that are necessary. And right now, I mean, county and local governments need all the help that we can get. Local governments have been bearing the brunt of COVID. We saw during the last presidential administration, there really wasn't any national leadership to confront the COVID crisis. And so counties, local governments found themselves, we found ourselves having to figure out how to do things on our own, and we've borne the brunt of it. And that's why we've always advocated for more federal money to come in and help the counties. So I'm not sure what's going to end up happening at the legislature. We've been told to brace for cuts. But I know that our delegation from El Paso is working hard to make sure that we continue to get the funding that we need for schools, that we need for our hospitals, that we need for our local governments to provide the services that we need to provide to our residents.
We've touched upon a lot of topics. Is there something that maybe you want to discuss that I haven't brought up?
I think we mentioned it because, like you said, we spent a lot of time talking about COVID, but that's at the forefront right now. That's our big challenge. But I just want to remind folks that we're, we still have a way to go. We're not in the clear yet. We have to keep doing what we've been doing. We have to keep, washing our hands, wearing our masks, social distancing, testing. Our community has suffered a lot because of COVID. Yes, we have the vaccine and we're trying to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And the process can be very frustrating, but we're working to try to make those vaccines as accessible as we possibly can. And we just have to keep working together for just a little bit longer. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we have to keep working and working hard to try to control and defeat the virus.
I appreciate the information you gave last time about that mobile unit, because that sounds like a positive aspect for the rural areas that might not necessarily have a hospital. So I commend you for that, and for your efforts to try to bring attention for the communities in your district that are that maybe don't have access to medical care as much as people in the city do. I guess thinking about some of the other priorities that you mentioned earlier, public safety, how, so the city has its own police department, but if it's an unincorporated area, then it belongs to the sheriff. Could you talk a little bit about what the priorities are, or are you able to delegate those to the sheriff, or is it more his own vision?
Well, the sheriff is an elected official, so he is in charge of his department. Of course, we work very closely with him because public safety is a priority for us as a county as well. So just to give you an idea of an issue that we're starting to kind of think about and try to find solutions for, going back to the tremendous growth that we're seeing in Far East El Paso. When I started campaigning and walking the district back in September of 2019, even though that's only about a year and a half ago, there are literally new neighborhoods in Far East El Paso that did not exist when I started walking the district a year and a half ago. So we have this tremendous growth that we're seeing. And sure, when a new subdivision comes up, of course, they look at traffic and expanding the roads, and there's a lot of construction going on in East El Paso because of that, in Pelicano and Darrington and Horizon, because we know there's going to be more need with all of these new developments and new businesses. That's where the Amazon warehouse is going to be. So we've been really trying to deal with making sure that we have the necessary infrastructure for all that growth. But we also have to remember, we can't expect to have the same number of sheriff's deputies that we have now or a year ago. When you have literally thousands of houses, of new houses, new families, new households that are coming up. So one of the things that we're working with the sheriff now is to try to figure out, okay, well, what is that need going to be? Are we going to need to hire more deputies for those areas? Are we going to need a new patrol station? So for example, right now, on the east side of El Paso, the sheriff has 2 patrol stations. So one of them is on Montana Avenue, so way north, and then the other one is in Clint. So then you have the area that's growing, Horizon and East Lake, all of that area that's just growing exponentially, they're kind of in the middle. So you have to have deputies either all the way up from Montana come down or all the way from Clint to come up. And it's, obviously that can have an impact on response time, emergency response time. I mean, these are all things that we have to start planning for. So those are discussions that we've started to have with the sheriff's department so that we want to be prepared. We don't want to be playing catch up all the time, right? We want to be proactive and be ready.
So for example, would the city of Horizon have to negotiate with the county for them to get more help, or just because it's within the county, they are eligible to police that area? Or
so municipalities have, for the most part, their own police departments. Really, the sheriff's department is more in those areas that they're not located within a municipality. And it's funny, if you ever look at a map, the boundaries of the city of Horizon are actually pretty small. It's a small little area. When you think of Horizon, you kind of think of this big area, but the city is actually pretty small. So the sheriff actually does have a lot of jurisdiction in that area. And in the East Lake area, where a lot of these new developments are coming up, a lot of those homes are right in the middle. So you have the city of El Paso boundary, and then you have the city of Horizon boundary, and then you've got all of these homes right in the middle. And so those are the areas that fall right within the jurisdiction of the sheriff's department.
I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about constituent services. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my students live in your area. What kind of help can your office offer?
Yeah. So I have 2 staff members, and they both understand that, to me, one of the most important things that we can do is be here to answer the questions of our constituents. There are going to be some things that we can help with directly. So for example, a road is in bad condition out in Fabens. We can certainly handle that. Our roads and bridges department is in charge of handling that. I had an issue. I spoke to someone from Tornillo earlier where they were letting me know that there's some shrubbery that's overgrown, and so it's hard. It makes it difficult for the drivers to have a good view when they're turning. So I already contacted our public works department and asked them to go out there to take a look at that. So there's some issues that we can handle directly. But a lot of the phone calls that we get aren't necessarily county functions or county issues that we can deal with. But our job in that case is to make sure we point people in the right direction. So sometimes I get calls from folks who have questions about the UMC vaccine registration process. So then I put them into contact with the people at UMC who can answer their question if I can't answer their question. Or we have someone who lives within the city limits, the El Paso city limits, who has an issue with their street or a park in their neighborhood, or maybe they think that there's a violation of one of the city ordinances. So that's not an issue that me as the county commissioner can take care of, but I can certainly put that person in contact with his or her city representative, and then follow up to make sure that that issue got taken care of. So we get a lot of phone calls from folks who maybe are calling about something that doesn't necessarily pertain to county government, but we try to do our best to make sure that we get them in touch with the person that they do need to speak to. And then there are a lot of programs that the county does run directly. So for example, the funeral assistance program, the housing assistance program, we have grants right now that are being given to businesses who are suffering because of the pandemic. So we do have some programs that the county manages directly. And so our job is to try to answer as many questions as we can about those as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Holguin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.